Let's walk you through this week's assignments real quick. You get to this week's assignments. You're starting at the Start Here button again. You click onto Course Content, and then you'll see a folder. And you'll see a folder like that each time for each week. And all of the things that you need to do for each week are in that folder, and you can literally just go through them one by one, top to bottom. It'll tell you a little bit on the outside what we're talking about here. So we're going to be talking about the scientific methods here, and the general principle of the scientific method are that there is scientists believe that there is a reality that you can measure, and we can figure out what's going on by measuring the things, and we have to be very careful about it because we can be fooled. Our eyes can be fooled. We can have biases that make us interpret things differently. But scientists basically say there's an objective reality, and if we're careful enough, we can figure it out. And so that's what we're going to be playing with. So when you click on that, you'll get, they're structured the same way each time. So you'll have a module overview that kind of tells you a little bit why this matters that we're doing today. And then the video I'm making right now will become this walkthrough right there. Each week I'm going to have a little bit of a walkthrough that kind of walks you through what I want you to do that week. It's a couple of minutes that are probably well spent, just so that you can get an idea of what you're supposed to do, this week. So there's a listing of all the things you're supposed to do. So usually it involves things like read the lab handout, watch the lecture, watch the demo if there's a demo for the Labster simulation, and then watch the lab demo if there is one. There's not always one. And in this particular case, then we do activities completed, quiz on the lecture materials, turn in the question set, either in the form of a handout or a quiz. And if we were in person, or we had a hybrid class, you would share that with your classmates. But we're actually not going to do that here because we're not going to have a discussion board like that. I usually try to put a little bit of a meme here somewhere to just kind of, sometimes memes can make you think, and science is one of those things. I've had this discussion just with somebody who, I'm trying to convince them that they're wrong. And she had her feelings hurt, and she says to me, well, I realize you feel very strongly about your opinion, and so I don't question your opinion. And I said, no, by all means question my opinion. Because if my opinions aren't based on facts, and you've got better facts than I do, as a scientist, I am willing to change my mind in a heartbeat if you have better facts. Bill Nye, the Science Guy, was asked one time when, it came to evolution, how life came about or whatever it was. But he was asked, what would it take for you to change your mind? And he said, better data. There are lots of things that we don't have good data on, that we don't know how exactly it works. And as a scientist, we're always willing to change our minds with better data. So then the next thing you're always going to find is there's going to be a lab handout. The lab handout is going to be in PDF and in doc format, but they're going to be the same thing. When you click on that, it tells you all the background that you need. So by all means, look at that lab handout. It's one of the quickest ways for you to figure out what's going on. Now, if it ever happens that you see a quiz where there was absolutely no connection between the quiz and the lab handout, by all means, ask me, because I am not asking you to go around and try to find the information. The information should literally be like right there. So this particular lab handout tells you a little bit about termites, about the social order of termites, and I want you to understand a little bit about that. We'll pick up on termites a couple of times throughout the semester. I'll mention them a couple of times because there's a couple of things that are really interesting about them. So for example, cellulose, we'll talk about that when we talk about chemicals. How come cellulose can be digested by termites but not by us? There's an organism that lives inside of the termite in a symbiotic relationship that is a flagellated protozoan that helps them do that. And then we're going to talk about we're talking about the scientific method here. That scientific method always starts with an observation, with something that made you go, huh? Trying to explain, asking questions, figuring out what could be going on there. And then you formulate a hypothesis, which is kind of an educated guess, that usually hints towards an experiment that you could be doing. And then you do the experiment. You have certain variables that are involved in that, and I'll talk about that in the lecture. So I'll all of these things I want to talk about in the lecture, and then as you keep on going, you get to this section that's the question set. And the question set, that's the part that you're going to actually work with, fill out, and then submit. So after the lab handout, there's the background information. This is what you're going to need to know and listen to, read through, whatever, before you attempt the homework assignments. So there's the lecture, and I'm talking about termites and science and all that. Then here, this is a little sideline, but I actually think it's really interesting in terms of how humans think. It's like 4 minutes or so. It's not very long. And it's a puzzle that this person gives a couple of different people, and I want you to just listen to it and see if you can come up with an answer and how you go about. The more interesting part is not so much the answer; it's how humans go about trying to figure out the answer to something. And what that means for us, how we approach science. Um, then and then comes demonstrations. So demonstrations, there's different things I'm going to demonstrate to you. I'm going to demonstrate. Sometimes it's going to be how microscopes work, how experiments are done, how I want you to do something, and sometimes it's just simply an intro to how Labster is going to work. In this particular case, I'm going to go over the termite experiment with you, because the termite experiment, when we're in the lab, we can kind of do this with our hands, right? We've got termites running around, and I've got to sort of show you where you got to go this time to do that. And what you're doing is going to be in here under to do activities and assignments. So these are where you're going to find what you're supposed to do. There's usually going to be a lecture quiz, which prepares you for the exam. Then to get to Labster, you literally just click on this. You just click on this. It takes you straight to Labster. If you have not gotten a code yet, you may be able to buy a code right there. At least we were able to do that last year. I don't know if they've managed to change that by now. If they've made it so that they actually blocked you from being able to buy it right here. But if you're still able to buy it right here, buy it right there. Give them a credit card. You cannot buy it right here with financial aid. Financial aid, you'll have to go through the bookstore. And if you're going through the bookstore, you have to remember what lab you are. So the lab, right? Like you see it right here. 19Z1. That would be the session, the section for this particular that I'm doing this in. And so whatever it says up there, not in this video, but in your lab site, right? And then you just click start, and you got this little lady that's talking about experimental design. So, and you can make her shut up. You can click on this lab thing to click on the sound. You make music and sound effects go away. And she talks about variables. You see that there's a variable over here on the right. And what this is, it asks you to check for the cause of a recent epidemic, which I think is kind of interesting that they're talking about an epidemic. But you literally just kind of click on these things and click continue, and then the lab pad tells you, what you need to do next. You've got this little doodle hickey, and then you can open doors and go places and look around, put a lab coat on, and put gloves on, and all of that kind of stuff. So Yes. So there's different things you can do, and the demo kind of shows you a little bit what you can do with Labster, but that's basically what Labster is. Follow the arrows. Whenever it says arrows, you should go to the arrows and look at what it's telling you to do, to say. Um, yeah, but at any rate, let's go back to the course content. So that's where the Labster experiment comes in, and then comes the question set. And the question set, you've already seen part of the question set. I've modified it a little bit. Actually, let me look at the PDF instead. I've modified it a little bit. So the original question set you just saw as part of the lab handout is what we usually use in the lab. But this one is going to be a little different because we're going to have to use data that's from the internet. And luckily, we have lots of curious students who have filmed their termites. And so what they did is, so we've got these videos here that you can watch, where somebody filmed how their termites were following lines, and see that, that's what they do. They follow lines. And based on these videos, you'd be saying, oh, they follow pretty much all the lines, right? But that may have something to do with the fact that students are more fascinated with termites that follow lines than students being fascinated with termites not following lines. So the question that's there for you is, what lines do they follow? And so when we go back to this handout, so you watch these videos and then you just record 3 observations. And then based on these 3 observations, you develop some hypotheses that are educated, testable guesses that you think you could test. So, testing, can these termites hear, or what are these termites thinking? That's not very testable, right? And so you write down 3 hypotheses, and then you decide on the one that you're going to test. And the one that you're going to test, you're going to have to think about, what are you going to measure? And in the quiz, I'm asking you, what are measurable variables? And then you're going to do the experiment. You're going to do it. You're going to look at the variables that you're holding constant. You have to write up a step-by-step procedure, and the termites that you've got is going to be in this table. So when you're going back to the site here, on this site, let's say, for example, you want to see, do they follow the red ballpoint pen? You have 8 different termites that are running around on a red ballpoint pen. And if you click on this YouTube video, what's going to happen is this YouTube video comes up and it shows you a termite that, a simulated termite that may or may not run along on a line. And then you've got to make decisions as to how you're going to measure, how you're going to compare this termite to a different termite, that may be like this termite. Which termite follows lines more? Is it the first one you saw, or is it the second one you saw? And how are you going to measure this, right? What are the things you're going to say? Oh, do I measure the distance that the termites walk on the line? Do I measure, the time that it spends on the line? What is it that I'm going to do? And then how I'm going to compare these numbers. And once you've done that, once you've done the necessary repeats that you need to do, you then have a quiz, wherever it is. Where is the quiz? Hang on. Question set. Am I in the wrong class? Give me a second here. So the question set is right here, and the question set basically gives you the ability to answer the questions that were posed in this question set. So this is a quiz. You just click on it, and part of why I'm giving you quizzes is for the immediate feedback, but the other part is so you get practice just doing quizzes. So you click begin. And then these particular ones are mostly essay questions. So you just type in, your answer that you think. And then there's some of the questions are multiple choice. So this one, note that it says, what can you measure? Um, it doesn't necessarily mean what do you measure, right? What you measure has to do with your activity later on, but I want you to think about what can you actually measure, and then what is it you're testing, um, and that both tells you something about what kind of variable you've got at your hand, and and then you just save and submit, or you can save all the answers. In my case, I'm just going to close it and leave. You've got 3 times that you can take this quiz. That's usually the case. The questions that you can take as many times as you want to. But the quizzes, I can usually, I'll let you, the lecture quizzes, I usually let you take them 3 times. Then it shows you the learning objectives. Those are the kinds of things I want you to get out of that. And then optional resources at the end, those are not required, but they speak to a couple of aspects of this activity. One is the aspect of clear instructions. So the exact instruction challenge on the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then this other one is Deborah Gordon, I believe, is a I forget what she does. She may actually be a brain researcher or something. But at any rate, she talks about termites. Ants. She talks about ants. And she talks about how what ant colony behavior can teach us about computers and about cancer, actually. Because ant colonies, similar to termite colonies, there's not a boss that tells them where to go and what to do, but somehow they still manage to communicate with each other. And it's kind of fascinating to see how they do that. And one of the things that you're realizing when you're talking about and I talk about this in the lecture a little bit. These termites with using pheromones actually communicate with each other with chemistry. And that's kind of fascinating when you think about it. But that's the basic walkthrough for what I want you to do this week. I hope you're going to have some fun and hope you maybe learn something new.